listeners, welcome to today's conversation. As you know, we are having these, what we call shots with a variety of people, and I have a very special guest with me today who I'm going to welcome in a minute. So, Abhijit Bhaduri, many of you who are listening in will certainly know him, as somebody very creative, somebody with a very diverse set of ideas, and I love him, not so much for his corporate experience, but the fact that what he's managed to do out of that corporate experience and bring a lot of ideas from outside in, if I may say so. So, Abhijit, congratulations on your new book, Dreamers and Unicorns.
Thank
And
you.
as you know, in this talk, we talk about talent, and you've spoken a lot about talent and culture in this book, and it's a privilege to sort of have this conversation with you. So, thank you very much for making time for this conversation.
No, Bimal, I'm grateful that exemplary HR leader like you has taken the time to read the book, and what more can I ask for? So thank you very much. I am obliged that you took that. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think before I kick off, I must tell all our listeners that it is a book worth reading if you're looking at building a career of any kind, whether it's inside corporations, whether outside corporations, and just I think it's also a very good picture to paint for yourself, if you will, after you read the book in terms of living your life, if you will, and not just in a corporate sense. So please do go ahead and read the book if you find the time and you're inclined to do that. So Abhijit, you talk a lot about talent in the book, right? So what are the key trends you are seeing? What are you seeing happening in the next, let's say, 2 to 3 years, kind of thing? And very different from the past, possibly.
Yeah, yeah. So thanks, Bimal. I think one of the pieces to really look at it is um, if you look at what the COVID scenario has done, is that it has accelerated many of the trends. I mean, and a lot of them were existing. For example, video conferencing, this technology of Zoom that we are using to record,
Right.
this has always been there. But when have we ever, you and I have ever sat down like this and exchanged ideas? We've waited till we met in some forum, or we at a common conference or something, and then we've spoken. So I think the opportunity to really um, you know create the possibilities that technology has had to offer, this is something that we have had to wait for this.
Mm-hmm.
The trend that I would say is, the way we view employment and careers has changed. So
Right.
one of the things I would say is, if you were, growing up at the time you and I did, you would say that if you are not a risk taker, then you would eventually, then you would find employment, because that was a safe bet. And you could choose your degree of risk from government to public sector to private sector and all of that, depending
Right.
on where you were on the continuum.
Right.
So you and I may have been on the other end of that risk continuum, but we're still employees. But
Mm-hmm.
now I would turn back and say that if you are a high risk taker, you should be an employee, because that is going to change a lot.
Right.
Organizations' lifespan is reducing. People are living longer,
Yeah.
and the skills are, the lifespan of skills is very low. So if you take
Mm.
these three together, suddenly you have a scenario that you have to start looking at your career in very, very different
Very.
ways. So this whole concept that we've always had, that now that you've got a job, you have settled down. So
Mm.
I think
Mm.
settling down is a thing of the past.
Is a thing of the past.
So yeah, and it is for everyone. I mean, settle down also means that because people are going to live longer, that means,
Yeah.
in that sense, think of your career as, how do you plan to do things in the next 3 to 5 years? And
Right.
don't sort of say that, okay, now that I'm a lawyer, I'm going to be a lawyer all my life.
Mm. Mm.
And
Mm.
the opportunities are coming up in many, many different ways. I mean, so for example, if you think about translation work,
Right.
earlier, the opportunities were, you either had a scientific document that needed to be
Mm.
translated, or you have a visiting diplomat who needs translation. So it was those kind of employment opportunities, which were very restricted. Today, when you have let's say videos from every culture and country, suddenly
Mm.
the demand for translation work has gone through the roof. It's exponentially grown. Yeah. So suddenly translation work is just a hot new area that you can work in.
Right.
So those are some of the things, which means that if you are not revising your career strategy in 3 to 5 years, you're probably going to start falling behind on the curve and move
Right.
from being, as I said, between unicorn and incumbent,
Right.
the journey is very short.
Journey is very short. Yeah, absolutely. So, Abhijit, let me switch that question, right? So if I were to say that, I am a person, let's say, who's actually now realizing, that I need to change my career strategy, as you called it, right? What are the three, four things I should keep in mind, as I craft my career strategy for the future, apart from these trends you talked about, at a very personal, I'm a talented guy, I've done well in my career and all of that stuff. But what should I then do now, in practice?
Yeah. So one kind of way in which you fast forward the change is
Hmm.
to actually create an artificial barrier for yourself. I mean, so one of the ways to think is to say that, let's imagine that your notice period is 2 months or 3 months, whatever be your notice period as an
Right.
employee. Tell yourself that I have a 30-day notice period. On Monday morning, that notice has been served on me, and
Mm.
it's not voluntary. I've been asked to leave. If that is the
Correct.
scenario, what are you going to be doing? So
Right.
if you start thinking about that, what work would you do? What skills would you need? How would people know that you are good or bad? And all that, you start sort of seeing that. Then you start to think of what I need to do next. Otherwise,
Mm.
people kind of eventually say, okay, after this job, I think I'll get promoted, I'll move to this. And
Right.
when career transitions are involuntary, which
Mm.
in today's day and age, the involuntary transitions are much more, and it can be
Much.
for multiple reasons. So
Correct.
you could be in a company which gets bought over,
Correct.
and then you were the big guy in the small pond in a startup. Suddenly you are the small guy in that big pond, and nobody really cares.
Yeah,
And so it could be
absolutely.
that scenario. It could
Right.
be the scenario that the company's product is out of business, and I mean,
Mm.
it's no longer relevant. Or it
Correct.
could be that the company, for multiple things, there's a scam, or it hits the CEO, quits, dies. There are all kinds of scenarios in my book. I've talked about many of those.
Yes. Yes.
And then you are having to do something different.
Mm.
Then, when it is involuntary, the time available for you to actually land in the second phase is very little. So
Mm.
you are
Mm.
always better off when you eventually experience. So let's say whenever you start in whichever career, even if you are starting
Mm.
as the CEO, you have
Yeah.
a unicorn phase, sorry, the dreamer phase, which is the first couple of
Mm.
months, if you will, where
Yeah.
which they say is the honeymoon phase. Everything is right, you are trying to figure out things, you're making friends, people
Correct.
are
Correct.
being nice to you. Then you have a unicorn phase, hopefully, where you're doing things and it is working, and people are saying, wow, I mean, that's a really great hire, and so you're on the curve. um, on the day that you start hitting that curve is the day to start thinking, what happens if I was served my notice today because the
Mm.
board discovers there's a massive accounting scam that has happened and I have to step down?
Correct.
What happens? So, just thinking of those kind of scenarios and,
Mm. Mm.
preparing yourself is probably the first step. And then you decide, should I work in the same industry? Should I work in an adjacent industry or a completely different industry? Should I
Yeah.
change my
Yeah.
location? Within the location, look for something different or a different location. Should I
Mm.
change my sector, work in an adjacent place or a different sector? Uh,
Correct.
you know, it's many different things. Should I change my the function that I've been? And I've been in HR.
Mm.
Can I do
Mm.
something completely different? So
Correct.
each of them comes with a talent equation, if you will.
Yes. Yes.
So
Absolutely.
then you work towards that.
Mm. Mm. Yeah. I think it's interesting, Abhijit. Like in a way, there's an old adage which says that uh, luck happens when preparation meets opportunity, right? And what you're basically saying is that if you've got a process of preparing yourself, you don't really know when an opportunity will come, and you should be able to latch onto it in that sense, because there are lots of new opportunities happening as well, apart from the quote unquote the disruption side of things. but
Yeah.
uh, but let me flip. Yeah, sorry, go ahead, you're saying something,
No,
Abhijit.
no. I
Yeah.
mean, it's right, and a lot of times the opportunity, even for yourself. I mean, it triggered a very interesting idea. When I started my own work, I really wanted to focus on leadership, talent, and culture. One of
Yeah.
the things that happened was somebody came and spoke to me about coaching him through a leadership transition that he was going through. And having done that, and I helped him build his profile and social media, etc.,
Yeah.
all of that. Then he spoke to a couple of his friends because, a bunch of people, there was a
Hmm.
change of buyer, and, they removed the entire chunk. That whole chunk I worked with,
Right.
eventually. And from there, that part of the business has grown disproportionately faster than something which I had started off and thought through. So
Correct.
the opportunities sometimes come in most unexpected ways.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, that's absolutely true. So, Abhijit, let me flip that question to organizational side. This is sort of the individual side. What do you think organizations are likely to do, or what are the trends you're seeing? What are organizations really doing, and are there other organizations experimenting with new stuff? Are they trying out new stuff? Because this is a completely new world of talent management, if you will. Yeah. So what are you
Yeah.
seeing on that side?
So I think, it's sort of talent is really dependent on how clued on and connected the leadership team is, because,
Right.
leadership, talent, and culture, the three things that I talk about,
Yeah.
they are interrelated, sure, but I think the whole process of jumping the paradigm, going into doing something different, actually
Yeah.
comes from the leadership team.
Yeah.
Because those are the guys who can really define and say, we've been a square all the while, we are now going to be a rhombus, or we are going to be a
Correct.
circle. That kind of a radical shift can only come from the leadership team. So,
Correct.
and many of the leaders are, they don't feel, you tend to always think that the world is like you. So,
Mhm.
to give you an example, when people say, I want you to move to a room which is very quiet when we are doing this video conference, I'm assuming you have multiple rooms, one of which is quiet, and you've got
Correct.
great equipment, you've got the right Wi-Fi connection, etc. I'm
Yeah.
assuming, because I tend to think that everybody in the world has the same
Mm.
scenario.
Yes.
The same thing happens with leaders of organizations. They very often
Mhm.
tend to imagine that the change is not as radical as what these guys, are making it out to be. So
Right.
therefore, one of the things of innovation is it never happens in the center. It
Hmm.
always happens at the fringes,
Very,
So
very.
because the fringe allows for mixing, the center is the last one to mix.
Yeah.
But so then the organizations which are less hierarchical,
Hmm.
are the ones which are going to listen to all the people at the fringes and are
Yeah.
able to bring those changes in. The
Hmm.
more insulated a leader is, if they are getting their information from what is being fed to them,
Right.
whether it's the leader of a business or a startup or a religious organization or a
Hmm.
political
Hmm. Hmm.
organization, the process is the same. You
Right.
have to be connected to what is happening at the fringes,
Hmm.
because
Hmm.
innovation never happens at the center. It is
Yeah.
always in the
Right.
fringes.
Right. No, that's a great point, Abhijit. And if I just build on that, and I do consulting work, as you know, with a whole variety of companies, right? And I think uh, I think there are companies which are doing some good stuff and some great stuff and taking, if you will, leaps of faith with their talent management models. But there are also a lot of companies which are struggling because they're stuck in legacy, hierarchical in nature, and sometimes also the industry doesn't allow them to do certain things that they would ideally like to do in their mind, at least, right? But in
Yeah.
your experience, where is it that you are seeing bottlenecks, in the sense that if the industry were to move forward in a way where the company would benefit, the individual would benefit in the process, and you then end up creating sort of an ecosystem which is a win-win ecosystem. Where do you really see the bottlenecks? That why is it, if I were to ask you a question directly, why would it not happen for a company? You of course mentioned this whole thing about the leadership side, but what else is coming in the way?
I also think that, many a times, and now this is, of course, I'm sort of limiting it to the what I've seen in the last couple of years as I've worked with organizations. The challenge very often is that I think the way an average decision maker understands talent, the
Hmm.
term talent,
Yeah.
that is sometimes very restricted and flawed. So,
Hmm. Hmm.
for example, what is it that, and if I were to sort of take a sweeping generalization, and obviously there are going to be lots and lots of exceptions to this
Correct.
statement,
Sure.
you sort of see what is the one thing that family-owned businesses struggle with? It is
Hmm.
succession planning, yeah,
Correct.
because the
Correct.
kind of they want to keep ownership and control of the business
Absolutely.
within the family, or within the line of succession. And when that happens, that same mindset actually also happens further down the line. So it is not,
Mm.
it is not complicated enough that they are doing this at the top, but they are also doing it at multiple levels. So
Right.
most companies really grapple with succession planning,
Mm.
because for most people, succession also means being able to spot the potential and to dissociate performance from potential
Right.
is very hard.
Mm.
And it takes many, many years. And you're an expert in talent management, and you would say that spotting potential is much harder. To know
Correct.
that, uh, when the guy has been playing cricket, to be able to say that, oh, I think the person would make a fabulous
Absolutely.
coach.
Correct.
And many of the top sports people of every sport
Mm.
have
Mm.
realized that they may be fantastic as players, but they're not that great as coaches, because the
Correct.
potential
Correct.
may be limited in being a coach. So that's
Absolutely.
the first part. The second part is to be able to actually work. So, who are able to do it? Where the leadership team, by and large, has had the comfort of having an outside-in view,
Mm. Mm.
or in many of the firms which are, and you and I have both worked for many of these firms which are very strong in their talent management processes, where they put
Right.
people through a grind. There's a process, there's the
Correct.
evaluation, there's a selection process. You are again on probation, and you work that thing, you are developed. Everything, when it is put together, it really creates a phenomenal opportunity for people to build the talent base. So that's how the talent brand of a company is built.
Correct.
Therefore, to the one answer to your question is, if you do have a very strong talent brand, that
Mm.
means you don't need to convince people to join your company.
Correct.
Then you do have a strong talent brand, and
Absolutely.
then that may be a good way to evaluate, do you
Mm.
really need to invest in developing your talent management processes.
Right.
um,
No, that's a good way of looking at it, Abhijit. So, you know, uh, as almost as a last question, right? So let me ask you this: if you've talked about in a broad sense about, as you said, leadership, culture, and talent, and the modern workplace, if you will, so the workers, workplace, and aspects related to that kind of a thing, and work itself.
Correct.
What are the two or three characteristics of work you see changing by itself? Even if I leave out workplaces and workers, by
Yeah.
itself, do you think work, the nature of work, or in the way it is performed? Of course, technology is bringing in a lot of changes, but apart from that, are there other principal characteristics you see?
Yeah. So, I think, in the case of work, the biggest change that comes in is through technology. But then,
Hmm.
there are other factors which define work. So let me spend a minute on the technology
Sure.
part of it. Technology, when it is brought in, till the time it is prominently visible,
Hmm.
if the technology is prominently visible, it's usually new technology,
Correct.
and everyone is talking about that. And once the technology becomes accepted and integrated into the work, it becomes invisible. So, for
Correct.
example, when you think about, at a very elementary level, when today you and I, we say that, oh, I've got electricity at home. Uh,
Yeah.
and you would wonder, okay, so what's the big deal about it? But
What's the deal?
so then that is how electricity has now become invisible. But if I say that, oh, the algorithm that decides which movie Netflix is going to serve up for you, can predict ABC about your tastes, then you kind of, you are fascinated, because it's still relatively new, but it's
Yeah.
still at the back end. But if you
Hmm.
think about companies' adoption of technology, let's say in the talent management space, to be able
Correct.
to get far more data points, to be able to
Hmm.
do research, etc. This is still, nascent. I mean, one sign is that if somebody starts to write a story about it, then chances are that it is still very new.
Right.
And it's you are still fascinated and
Correct.
starry-eyed about the technology. So if you land up saying that, think about it. Businesses have invested in consumer research for years
Hmm.
together. Yeah.
Correct.
So if I
Correct.
if I today I told you that, oh, Bimal, let me tell you something really earth-shaking that I've done. I've set up consumer research.
Right.
What would be your reaction? You would say, oh, you are just discovering it today. All right, you are very late in the game. So Abhijit, grow up. This is nothing new. Companies have done it for decades. Yeah.
Correct. Correct.
But if I told you that I have a separate unit which does research on employees, how many companies would you be able to name who do that?
Very, very few actually. Maybe not, maybe none.
And maybe, you would probably say 2-3 of the companies, and then, they are also limited themselves to just
Correct.
data, which is quantitative. There is hardly anyone who does qualitative research. Why?
Correct.
It is not that the skill doesn't exist. So Zoom existed before, but it's only now we are using it to bring the ideas together. Correct. So research methodology is known. So why do we not do that? And just this whole mindset that we have always had engineers to do this work. We have always had MBAs to do this work. We've always had people from this company to do this work. It's just an ancient mindset. Right. Think about it even today, and I was just going to put that on Twitter, that even today, when you hire freelancers and gig workers, the conversation is finally closed in the purchase department. It's not in the human resource department.
So absolutely.
Gig workers are not looked at as human resources. It's a purchase item, so if you ask for $100, the purchase guy will say, no, but we buy this at 30. That's the only value add the purchase department does. But that is how it is done, because people do not understand gig work. It is still, it's not reached the stage of electricity. So
correct. Absolutely. No, Abhijit, that's a great, and we come to the end of this conversation. I'm sure that we can talk a lot about, this, aspect, and it is becoming more and more important. So Abhijit, I do look forward at some time to delving even deeper into some of these aspects. This format is a short format, as we talked about, but I do hope that our listeners have taken back some interesting ideas. I certainly have taken back a few thoughts to work with you, Abhijit, further on, and a few thoughts to work on my own as well. But thank you for the time, thank you for the conversation and for the ideas, and I do hope, as I said, to continue this conversation at some point of time. So thank you very much, and have a good day.
Thank you very much, Bimal. It'll be my privilege to, talk to somebody as accomplished as you, and it'll be such a great opportunity for me. Thank you very much for thinking.